Welcome to the Perfomer podcast. Stay tuned for practical tips, strategies, and interviews that will help you get one step closer to that performing career dream of yours. Hosted by me, Michelle Thole, success and performance coach for performers, a proud Hufflepuff, bopper, and a theme park lover. So here we go, on with the show. Meet burlesque singer Sophie Coulthard, or should I say Alana Royale, which was her stage name. Sophie has since moved from the burlesque world into owning her own business as a work and life harmony strategist, and she still uses all those performing skills that she's had in the past to stand up and speak on stage about burnout, work frustrations, and also achieving that work-life harmony. The episode today, I wanted to get Sophie on because it was so important to me to talk about body confidence, about nudity in the arts, exploitation, and how it feels to be that exposed on stage, but also what life is like after having a performing career. Because you know what? I don't want to be the Perfomer podcast that don't talk about all facets of the industry. And that is also life after the industry if you decide to choose it. So here we go. Here's Sophie Coulthard. Grab yourself a cup of tea or whatever it is. I think for me, I need some vegetable soup right now. And get comfy because here we go. On with the show. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. Today we've got Sophie Coulthard, who is what I deem to be an amazing person, and I can't wait for you to hear all the little tips and strategies she has for you. But instead of me introducing you, Soph, why don't you actually tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me. So I am really an ex-performer, although I wouldn't say that I've stopped performing in any way. I am now a work and life harmony strategist. So I help people move towards work and life harmony, and I do that, and I speak a lot of events. And my background as a performer was I was singing and dancing from the moment I was born, probably. And I went to an amazing school called the Arts Educational School, where I learned everything that I needed to know, really. And I went on to do all sorts of singing, dancing, acting, but I probably spent most of my performance life as a burlesque dancer. So I'd say that's my experience.
I can't wait to get into this burlesque world with you, Sophie. So how did you get involved in burlesque?
Well, do you know what? It's interesting because burlesque probably came last in my performing career. I had a lot of experience singing and acting, but I was always fascinated by burlesque. I was obsessed with Dita Von Teese. There is a British burlesque dancer called Immodesty Blaze, who's really worth checking out because she's just fantastic. And it wasn't until I got fired from a job, actually, that I said, right, I'm 25, I've got nothing to lose. Now is the time to start this burlesque journey. And that's how I started. One thing that I did notice from going to watch lots of burlesque shows is that there were people that were either singing that didn't really take many clothes off, or there were people who were doing both, but I felt like I had something extra that I could offer. So that's why I started to become a singing burlesque dancer, really.
I love that because you saw a gap in the market, so to speak, and you just went forward and kind of took your piece of the pie.
Yes.
I
did.
How did your family react to your burlesque career?
Well, do you know what? They were really supportive. I'm quite lucky that I have quite a liberal family anyway. And they've always kind of had a do what you want to do sort of attitude. So when I told them that I was going to start doing burlesque, and I began by entering a burlesque competition. That was my literal first performance that I ever did was a competition. But yeah, they were great about it, and they actually did come to watch me a few times as well, which was always slightly awkward when my dad was in the audience. But I think he just sort of looked away at the end and appreciated it for what it was.
So let's talk about nudity then. And was there a point in which you were fully nude on stage, or was it kind of just nipple tassels and your modesty here and there? Or
Yeah, I would say that the most burlesque performances that you'll see, people will end up perhaps in a thong, or some sort of French knickers, and nipple tassels. Yeah, I think the only danger you'll ever see a nipple is if nipple tassels not been stuck on properly. So
good old, I love a nipple tassel story. So what are your thoughts about nudity in the arts?
yeah, do you know what? I think when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have been too comfortable with it. I know I was asked to audition when I was younger, when I was about 18 or 19, for a few different roles that required nudity, and I just wasn't comfortable with it at all at that age. And maybe it is something you get, the older you get, the less you care about it, really. But I know that, I think if it feels right for you, then do it. I know that burlesque has kind of been hailed as being a great confidence booster for lots of women. There's lots of women going out there and doing workshops with burlesque performers, for hen dos and things like that. And I think if you can find something in that you can take away that makes you feel good about yourself, then embrace it and go for it. I always felt quite comfortable taking my clothes off on stage. I think when you've done it once, what's another 50, 100 times? But everybody's different. I think everybody's going to have different levels that they're prepared to go to. You've just got to think about yourself. And I think you also have to think about your future, as in 10 years' time, would I be comfortable watching this back? Does it fall into my values of what I think is acceptable or not? So
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson to learn, really, because when being young and carefree, you don't really think about maybe as a woman having a family later on and them seeing everything. So I think you have to really be happy with every single step of the journey. And if there isn't any like a 100% certainty, then maybe you should think of other things to do. I mean, how do you feel about that?
definitely. One step that I took, when I got into burlesque, which was a conscious decision, but I didn't realise, I guess, how much technology would change over the years, is that I always chose, obviously, as a burlesque dancer, you have a burlesque name. I'm happy to share mine. It was Alana Royale, because
I
my middle
love
name,
it.
my middle name was Alana. And Royale obviously has that kind of royalty and grandeur about it. But I always made sure that anything burlesque related stayed under the name Alana Royale. If you Google my name as it is now, Sophie Coulthard, you won't find a single picture of burlesque or reference to burlesque at all. So I was quite lucky that I thought of that then and separated the two out. And I actually know a lot of performers that have had to go through this. I've got friends who are models, and perhaps they did some modeling shots when they were younger that were perhaps a bit more glamorous and not really in line with what they're doing now. And it can be a real struggle to try and get those pictures off the internet, or they're still out there representing you. So it is something that you have to think about quite carefully.
Yeah, I've been to quite a few burlesque shows in my time, and I've always had the most amazing night. It's been great fun, and I think changing that perception for people, it isn't stripping. It isn't. It's an art form, and as soon as you change that perception, you see it for what it is, and you just relax and have such a great night.
Yeah, one of the things that people are often surprised about if they've never been to a show before is how the audience is mostly women. And certainly when I was perhaps single and I'd be dating and a guy would ask me, and you end up saying you're a burlesque dancer, and all sorts of thoughts probably pop into their head. But actually, they're quite often surprised to know that the audience is full of women who are there empowering other women, and a lot of the guys that are there have either been dragged along. There's not tables of stag do's or anything like that, and it's just got this fun atmosphere. It's not one thing that I struggle with sometimes if I do go and see a burlesque show. If there's ever an act that's what I don't think represents burlesque, and by that I would mean something which is the sort of thing that you would find at a strip club, which on occasion does happen, and nothing against the person that's up there performing, but if you look into the history of burlesque, how it started, how it came about, burlesque was started because obviously there were laws about nudity, and people were not allowed to show everything. So it was about the tease, the art of the tease. And the best way to do that is through comedy and telling a story. And so these performances were theatre productions of somebody telling a story. There was normally a send up, some sort of comedy at the end. And that was what gripped me and made me think, wow, I could get up there and I can perform, I can sing, I can, yes, take a few clothes off, but it's about that. It's not about, and yeah, okay, some sensuality comes into it sometimes, but not always. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realise unless they've really been and seen it for themselves.
Yeah, and I honestly would recommend going to any burlesque show. Honestly, I've had a great time every single, every night I've been. But the one thing I'm thinking about right now, listening to you, is where did your body confidence come from?
Do you know what? This is one thing as well, because people say to me, "Oh, you must have to have a really good figure to be a burlesque dancer." And actually, when you go and see a burlesque performance, I would say you would see more bigger women. It's about the curves. It's about the voluptuousness, if that's the right word. So there was never any worry that I wouldn't fit with what a burlesque performer looks like, because they look like anything and anyone. I guess the only body confidence issue is about your own perception of yourself, really, and whether you're comfortable. And I think, like most women, you have ups and downs, and you have times where you're more comfortable than others with your body. But you put some of these outfits on and these sorts of tights, and you learn how to move your body in a way that looks a certain way, and you can create something quite beautiful. It doesn't matter if you've got a chest, no chest, if you can twirl your tassels or not. That if you can put on a show, guaranteed the audience will enjoy it. And so I suppose I can't really give a definitive answer to body confidence. I guess I just got on with it. Did it.
But is that a strategy that you use to get on stage, with nerves? And did you ever get nervous before a performance?
Do you know what other singing that I've done? So my whole thing with burlesque was to get up and sing a song from a musical theatre show. Really, like If You've Got It, Flaunt It. I think it's called that. When You Got It, Flaunt It. Dance 10, Looks 3 from a chorus line, which is the classic song that goes tits and ass. And I knew I could sing those songs well. Probably not to West End standards, but I could pull off a decent performance. So actually I wasn't really that nervous, whereas I think if you'd have thrown me into an audition for Jesus Christ Superstar or something like that, I might have had that feeling of, oh, I'm probably not at the level as the best. I don't think there is a best in burlesque. It's about taste, and it's about what you like to see, really.
I quite like that, though, there isn't a best in burlesque, because again, I think a lot of people have this comparison with that person's voice versus this person's voice, or that person's soliloquy versus this person's soliloquy. And in actual fact, it's all an art form. There's beauty in every which way. It's hard, really, isn't it, to compare?
Yeah, and you go and see a show and you'll have somebody sing, somebody might do a very dark performance. Somebody might come out and do a typical fan dance, very traditional burlesque dance. You might have some men thrown in there, some magic, some tricks, and it's just a variety show. It's like vaudeville or something that you would find in the 50s, really. So yeah, it's very difficult to get to a place where you're comparing yourself to others, because you're really just doing your own thing, and that's what I loved about it. I love the creative side, so I loved planning what my costume would be, spending hours sewing sequins and tassels, and just dancing around my living room trying to put the whole thing together. And you don't get a lot of freedom like that in performing, actually.
Have you noticed, looking back at your career, which parts of your performing career has been maybe the most restrictive?
Any type of acting, I suppose, because you're being directed, and normally when you have a director of a play, they're very, they know what they want. There's not a lot of freedom there. But also I've sung in bands and things, and sometimes you do, if you're in a big band, you know, especially when you start to introduce instruments like you know, brass and things like that, you have to fit what everybody else is doing. So if you want to have a bit more creativity, then you do have to look outside the box and think, well, what could I do that's actually going to excite me? And I'd always had that little fascination, and I just took the leap, and you know, it was so much fun.
So I kind of want to move on a little bit here and talk about the differences in sexuality that comes up with males and females, because we've just talked about like a very sensual art form, which is burlesque. But you look at, I don't know, I think of TV shows like Game of Thrones, where maybe there's the odds, you know, I feel really coy saying it now, but you know, a man's part, but you'll always see a full frontal of a lady. And I just wonder, like, do you think that the industry could actually level the playing field when it comes to female and male sexuality?
Definitely. I think there's probably a way to go there. I don't know, you know, it's such a difficult conversation, because I actually don't mind seeing half naked women on screen if it's done. You know, you can always tell when it's just completely over and didn't need to be there. But I think I mean, I'd love to see more half naked men in certain TV shows. But yeah, obviously there's a big movement at the moment about leveling the playing field, and I think people now can tell a mile off if female nudity has just been shoved into a film or a TV program to try and up the ratings. And I don't think that does anything for anyone. I think you can see it coming, and it just doesn't, I don't know, it's not really promoting what we're trying to promote at the moment. You know, this big movement towards equal pay and all the rest of it all fits in. But I think if people are comfortable with their body and they want to, you know, it's relevant to the role, then why not? I don't think nudity should be something that we're ashamed of or trying to cover up, really.
Was there any point in your career that you had the brief for the character and it said nudity and you actually thought no? Or was it always yes for nudity for you?
Well, obviously, as I said before, there were a few auditions that I was asked to go to that required topless, and I was about 18, and I just didn't feel comfortable at that stage putting myself out there. And I'm glad I took that decision, because I think sometimes when you're 18, you think, you know, and you're out there and you're just starting to audition, you almost feel like you should be grateful for what you get. But actually you should still stick to your standards, whatever they may be. Funny enough, when I was still at school, we did a play in my final year. I can't remember what it was called now. And it required, and it was an all-female cast, and it required a kiss between me and another girl, who I happened to be sharing a dorm with as well. So it was quite awkward. And me and her had to basically get it on a little bit on stage. It had to be quite heated, quite a release of passion. And again, it's something we could have said no to, but we thought, do you know what, let's just do it. We'll hopefully get an A in this A level for this play. And it's just about what you're comfortable with, really. You just have to listen to yourself.
I remember the first ever time I had to do a screen kiss. I was so mortified. I ran home and I confessed to my husband like I'd cheated on him, and it was just the weirdest experience. And I knew from that point that maybe the whole seriousness of acting wasn't as great as maybe my singing career. And I always got to a point with acting where I realized my values came up, and I put a wall there, which I think, to be honest, did restrict the roles in which I went for, because a lot of them had predominantly nude scenes in, or promiscuous scenes that I felt really uncomfortable about. But that doesn't mean that you can't choose other avenues or other ways. So it's very interesting, isn't it, how your own personal values reflect on the career and the trajectory in which you go. So yeah, it's very interesting to hear that.
And I think if you stick to those, you won't regret it. You know, you may look back and think, oh, maybe I would have done that topless scene, or I would have done that, whatever it might be. But I think you're never really going to regret it, because at that time, that's what was right for you. And I think sometimes you can test yourself. If you're not sure about it, you can put a little tester out there and see what you feel comfortable with. But you should stick to what you feel is right for you.
Yeah, and that's very interesting you say that, because I think when you're in that situation, you know whether you feel uncomfortable or not, and that is the indicator, isn't it? Sometimes you have to put yourself in that position, but be able to say no, and maybe that's the tester, the no word coming in and being okay.
Yeah, and do you know what goes the same for things like photo shoots as well? You know, somebody asks you to go a little bit too far in a photo shoot, and you're not comfortable with it. I mean, you know, you just got to put your foot down. You're not being a diva. You're just staying true to yourself.
And there isn't a person that I've spoken to recently that haven't even had that experience. I had that experience. I think quite a few other people that I know have had that experience where it always goes that extra step. And it's actually interesting. We're speaking about this right now with everything that's going on with the industry, with the sexual allegations, because the more you look into it, the more you realize, because I said no, that didn't happen, but that could have easily have escalated into something else. And you really have to have a firm no in the performing industry as a whole, because there are so many people who are really wanting this to happen for themselves. And you can get taken advantage of.
Yeah, you can. And I think there's nothing wrong with being strong about it. And yes, some people are going to turn away and say, well, that was a silly mistake to make. And some people are going to respect you for it. And I don't think in the long run, is it really going to damage your career if you decide you're not comfortable with something? You know, there's always another way. There's always another path.
Exactly. And I think it's another thing that I hear quite a lot from my clients is they believe there's only one path when there isn't. There's so many different ways, which brings me on to my next question, actually, is you've now moved from performing into being a work-life strategist. So what made you change? Why aren't you performing now?
Well, if I had to be brutally honest, I would say money was a huge factor. I was lucky to get a very good performing arts education. I left school. We didn't have a lot of help then with getting agents or anything like that. So you were pretty much thrown out there and sink or swim, really. And I did bits of work, and I was pretty successful burlesque performing. In the long run, I don't think I ever really wanted it enough. If I really take a look hard at myself, but I was luckily I was lucky enough that my dad was a performance coach. He's been in coaching my whole life, so I've grown up with that. And he has a successful business, and he wanted me to be a part of it. And I'm very passionate about it and about what he does. And I've kind of moved the business along now into a direction that I think will work for me when I take over, when I convince him to retire.
Love that, a takeover.
And I've ended up, really using what I did as a performer. I wouldn't say I miss it, because I still feel like I get to do it. I get to get up on stage and talk in front of tons of people and be an expert at what I'm talking about, and probably command a little bit more respect maybe than I ever did as a performer. So I feel like even though I'm not doing it anymore, I don't feel like that is a failure. Other people may disagree, but that's the way it is for me, and I'm happy with what I'm doing now. Glad about what I did. I'm happy where I am now.
And I think that's a very great point, because it's about contentment, and how actually sometimes what you wanted when you were 20, you may not want when you're 30, you may not want when you're 40. And it's not a feeling of failure, it's a feeling of just moving on.
Yeah, it's not a straight line. Would I have done burlesque at 18? No, but at 25, that was what I wanted to do, and that's what I went into. Then I got to 30, and I was doing burlesque. I was singing in a few bands, and I thought, do I want to be spending every single weekend doing this, or do I want to find my career now? And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, my mum didn't know. And he had a mum who was a very successful businesswoman, a CEO of a company. And he said, oh, she didn't know what she wanted to do until she was 30. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope I do by the time I'm 30. Well, it took me till 33 to figure that out. But I use performing every single day. When you work in sales, as many performers probably do in their day job, they're probably better salespeople because of their background in performing. So I think you do have to think about what makes you happy, and if it's not bringing you joy, then don't do it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not fulfilling you.
Yeah. That's such a great nugget of truth, because I think when you have a dream and you're pursuing the dream, and then the dream seems to get further away and further away, even though you're working harder and harder, actually, if it's not bringing you joy, is there any point in doing it? Is it fair to give that to your career? To your performing career? Could it just be a labor of love? Could it just be a passion project and it'd still be fine?
Yeah, and I actually did burlesque. I never did it as a full-time job. It was always on the side of what I was doing, because it never brought in enough money, to be honest. And when I started earning money, I realised I quite liked it. And actually, would I have given that up to go and do something full-time? No. And I guess that's, everybody's different in that sense. You know, when I was 17, I thought I wanted to be Anna Friel. She was my absolute, the person that I looked up to, the person whose career that I wanted. And then things change. I don't mind that now. You know, there's different people that I look up to in a different way. But it's an interesting journey along the way.
Have your parents said anything about you kind of moving away from performing at all?
No. Do you know what? I think one of the hardest things that you have is when you are talented to whatever extent, because I don't know, I never would have described myself as a super talent. I was just, you know, good at making the best of what I had, which is that's probably a little bit hard on myself. But people can give you a hard time for giving it up, because they'll say, oh, but what a waste of your talent. Oh, you're a good singer. Why aren't you still singing? And you think, well, actually, yeah, I could still be singing, but I'd be in a place on a Saturday night performing when I'd actually rather be with my friends and family. And you've got to weigh that up. I mean, my parents were always really good about it. I did have a big argument with my uncle one time a few years ago, when he said to me, your parents have paid for your education, you know, and I was lucky enough that I got to go to a performing arts school from the age of 12 to 18. Your parents paid for your education. Do you ever feel like you failed them? And apart from telling him to do one, I said to him, but it's made me who I am. If I hadn't have gone to that school, would I have had the confidence that I have today? And it's a conversation that I have even with friends of mine who I've known since I was 12, who we all started there together, who might not be performers, some of them are, but we all say it turned us into who we were. That experience of performing, whether that's that you go to a weekly stage school or you go to a school when you're 18 or whatever, it does make you who you are. You can't take that away.
I was just thinking, because that's given me lots of food for thought, just how that message, it can be a weight off somebody's shoulders. The listeners that are listening right now, what a weight that is to hear. The fact that, you know, you cannot be defined by other people's standards of yourself, and that, you know, it's whatever happens, however your dream, your career turns out, it's the way that it was meant to be, and you do your best every which way along the process. So, and I love the fact that you are absolutely slaying your career at the moment. And also, the one thing I'd say is stage fright is the number one fear that human beings have. Whereas when you have all that performing background, you can just go on stage and just rock it. Where maybe other people in your industry that haven't had that performing background would be so nervous, and it would maybe have a detrimental effect on their performance. So I would actually say there's so many positives to having a background in performing.
Yeah, I mean, people get so frightened of speaking in public, don't they? And I think, I'm like, get me on that stage. How long have I got? 30 minutes. I'll bust that 30 minutes. So they'll have to drag me off. But it does give you such a good foundation to go on and do things like public speaking. It's just one example, but of how performing helps me. But yeah, it's about what makes you feel good. And I think the thing about it, when I think of young people who are leaving stage school or performing arts school now, and they're entering a different world probably to what I was, where social media rules and it's all about your followers and your following and who can make it, and how much effort you have to put in now. And I think you've got to think about what is making you feel good and what your goals are. And if your goal is to achieve whatever, become this singer or get onto the West End stage, there's a lot of people that turn around to me. A lot of my friends who've been very successful in the West End have said, I did it, and then I realised it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And that is when you have to think, if you're going to step away, it's not a failure. What I would say to anybody who's going through any sort of feeling like this is pick up a book called The Desire Map by Danielle Laporte, which I'm obsessed with, where she said that she was setting herself these goals and it was all about striving and achieving. And I think that's probably how you feel, especially as a young performer. Everyone around you is trying to make it. It's this big fight and constant push to try and make it. But actually, instead, think about how you want to feel, because quite often you're saying, and when I achieve this and when I get to the West End, I will feel like this. So therefore, you're spending most of your life not feeling the way you want to feel. So think about what's going to make you happy now and how you want to feel now, and put those goals in place. And I'm absolutely bastardizing what she's saying, so you'd have to read the book. But the basics of it is that. And I realised that, was I happy being an unemployed actor, probably spending more on my costumes to be a burlesque performer than I was getting paid to be a burlesque performer? Or am I quite happy to accept that it's a fun hobby, it's my little passion project, but this is what I'm serious about and this is what I'm passionate about?
Jill, you actually stolen one of my questions, which was, do you have any books you'd like to recommend? But that's the book, isn't it? Desire Map. Love that.
The Desire Map. And do you know what the other one would be? Which is what I always recommend to anybody that's not that woo-woo as well. And I know you love this book as well, which is You Are a Badass by Sincero, which is a very easy to read personal development book, and it just changes the way you think slightly about yourself and about how others might see you, etc., etc. So
yeah, and the thing about Jen's book, Jen Sincero, is I've read so many personal development books. Honestly, I'm like the encyclopedia of it. And what she does is she succinks it in such a way that you don't have to read 100 books, just read hers. And she picks out the best bits of all personal development and puts it in such an easy to read and understand book. And so I think I would really concur with that selection. Definitely. Yeah, I love that. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Here are the little quick fire questions I'd like you to answer that I'm going to ask most people when they come onto the show. What was your worst ever audition?
Oh gosh. Do you know what? My first ever burlesque audition, I had to audition in somebody's flat, and I was worried that I was going to get murdered. But I did it anyway. So I can't say I've had a disaster, but that was definitely...
That's nail bite intention right there. Also, so the one would also be, what book would you recommend? But you've already alluded to that, which is fantastic. What strategies do you use to keep stage fright at bay?
Oh gosh, preparation. Do you know what? I think preparation is the most important thing. And having spoken at different conferences, I know that there are certain conferences that I go to and I get up and talk, and I could still do that talk now because I was prepared. Whereas the ones where you're a bit wobbly and you don't know what's coming next, that's where you start to get the nerves and they start to kick in. So it's all about preparation for me.
What performance has been the highlight for you? Like, what's that diamond that the Queen has? The Hope Diamond, whatever it is, the Hope Diamond of your career.
Do you know what? Here we go. So it's not burlesque, but I was singing in a 50s rock and roll band, and we played at a festival down in Dorset, and the person that came on prior to us was a world-class Michael Jackson tribute act, and we were on afterwards singing, and I was singing Elvis and all sorts, and it was a huge crowd, probably the biggest crowd I've ever played to. I couldn't say how many people, and it was just an amazing experience. Love it. That's
so if we go back
highlight.
To the Desire Map, that was a feeling that it was connected to that.
Yeah, it was the feeling of people dancing around, enjoying the music, a family festival. It's not anything about how many videos, viewers you've had, or likes and follows and things like that. It was just about that feeling that you're bringing joy to people, really.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Do you have any words of advice for any performer that is listening right now who is maybe just starting out in their career?
Oh gosh, I would say to think long and hard about what it is that you really, really want to do, and how much you want it, and why you want it as well. I think if you can really, really nail that why, you're probably going to have a better chance of getting there. And I know sometimes people will say, don't have a plan B. I wouldn't have a plan B. But I actually think it's important to think of, and if this happened, would that be so bad? And if this happened, and think about, does anybody really know what their end is going to be when they're that age? But be open to anything, because you know what it's like. The universe has a way of giving you the things that you want that you might not even realize you want. So
hallelujah to that one. Hallelujah to that one. Honestly, if I would have told my 16-year-old self that I'd be sat here interviewing Sophie Coulthard, I literally would be pinching myself, because I think my idea was I was going to be working with animals, and my life is just ballooned into this wonderfulness. And I think, I'm sure that you'd agree that the idea of what we want, but what we actually end up with, sometimes is even better than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, enjoy the ride. I mean, when I think now, when I look at what fame is now, and I think, oh gosh, I wouldn't want that. I'm glad I don't have that. I'm glad I'm not famous. And I've got friends that have had various levels of success, and I think, oh, it's not for me. I never would have said that, in my teenage years. It would have been everything. But you reevaluate, don't you? Enjoy the ride.
Do you know what? That is the perfect sentence to end our conversation with. Sophie, thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. How can the listener find you? Where can we find you?
Well, I have a website, which is sophiecoulthard.co.uk. Coulthard has got an LTH in it. A lot of people leave it out. And I write a lot of things that might be useful, about things like how to find work-life harmony, because it's not an even balance, especially for performers. And I'm also on all the social media channels. So yeah, if you go to my website, you'll find it all from there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, and thank you so much. That's all I want to say is a big, massive thank you from my heart to yours.
Thank you. I think what you're doing is wonderful, and I can't wait to hear all the other episodes.
Oh, bring it on. Woohoo! Thanks, so.
There we go. Another episode in the can. Thank you so much for listening to the Perfomer podcast. It's amazing to have you here. If you haven't yet, please leave a 5-star rating, and also tell whoever you think will benefit from this as well. The more people that know about it, the better it is. Thank you so much to Sophie for being an amazing guest. And it wasn't just amazing to listen to her being so candid and open and honest about her body confidence, and how burlesque and the art of burlesque is just such an inspiring art form. I loved when she was saying about her dad kind of closing his eyes when she was stripping. I loved that bit. If you want to know more about me, Michelle Thole, you head on over to Michelle Thole, as in MT Ole, that's if you speak Spanish, .com, where you will find loads of information about me, about coaching, about my blogs, how I can help you. And if you'd like to kind of have a little convo with me, I'll be over on my Facebook page every Sunday at 7 p.m. for the Sunday show, which I make especially for performers. Episode 29 just went live, and it was all about the one thing you really need in your life right now. So head on over to my Facebook page, Michelle Thole Life Coach, and get involved. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I really hope it is warmer where you are than it is here, because it's absolutely freezing. See you next week, and thanks for tuning in.